this lesson, we'll stick with lists, and what we will do is we're going to see it within the context of functions. So how can we use a list and define it within a function and then pass it to another function, for example, to look at what is its value. So let's write an application where we have the main function in it, which we call the control function, and let's declare within it some sort of a list. All right, so and we'll put some data in. So let's call it my list and put in it a bunch of names. Okay, so let's say we had 3 names already in there. Okay, now and let's call main. So in itself, this will work just fine. We'll get no response in terms of the screen, but it will work. So we're not printing anything. Should you want to print, you could do this. My list. Then you can print the whole list in one shot, like this, right? With the brackets and the separations and all that. So it shows you the content. Or we could do a for loop, right? So we could do a for loop for item in, or you could say name if you want, my list, and then print item. So we could do it this way as well. We've seen this, but we're doing this within a function. So as you can see here, we could see each member. Now, what if we wanted to do this print in another function, in a separate function? Okay, so in other words, we're going to have to call that function and pass along my list for it to handle it. So how do we do that? Well, let's suppose, and let me just delete this here. We want to do this in another function here, and we're going to say def print my stuff. Right? So whatever you want to call this function. And in it, it will take an argument. So in the parameter list, you're going to have an argument that will be of type list, but it will be automatically assigned to it. But just for now, let's call it the list if you want. So it's a local list right here. And what we'll do is we'll try to print this list using a for loop, just like we did before. So for item in the list, print item. So just exactly like we did with my list. Now, if we try to run this, nothing will happen here. Obviously, we never called print my stuff. Now, what if we call it? Let's say we type print my stuff here and give it my list, which is what we know exists within main. So my list. Okay, so this is our locally declared list within main. And now it becomes the list within the print my stuff function. Well, let's see if it works. And there you have it. So as you can see here, it's working just fine. Just to show you, just that this is not a preview, so I'm gonna comment it out, run this again. You can see we see nothing. Now I'm gonna call it. As you can see, it steps right through it. So we were able to pass the whole list over to the function. Now, is it really the whole list? Is it a copy of the list, or is it a reference? Which means the list is the same as my list. Now, that would be totally different from what we've done with variables like something of type float or integer, your basic data types. This one is slightly different. What if we tacked along, right? What if we added an item here? Now, how do you add an item to a list? Well, you're going to use the method append. All right, so how do you do this? we can add an item here to the list. Dot append. And then you can add anything you want. And let's go ahead and add villa as a name. Right? So if we run this, the initial list had 3 names. Let's see if we now would have 4 names, including villa. And as you can see, villa was added. Now the key is, did it affect my list at all? What if I printed my list itself here and see if villa was actually stored in this list, even though I remotely, in another function, added villa? So let's just, for giggles, type print my list, print the whole thing. So we know this is going to print the whole thing with brackets, and we've seen this before. So let's see what happens. And lo and behold, villa is in there. Now you would think, because we added villa only to the list, it will be local to that function. Once we're out of there, we come back to my list, we will still get Drew, Bob, and Janet. However, notice and observe that not only villa was added to the list, but it was effectively also added to my list. So there's something fundamental about this. By passing my list over to the list, these two are one and the same. This is what we call passing by reference. So that means we've passed an actual physical address of where you stored this stuff, and the list is a representative of my list effectively. And we were able to prove that by independently printing my list, and sure enough, it had villa. Now, this is totally different than passing along a float or an integer over as part of the arguments or parameter list. So this is a very important observation. So that means I don't necessarily need a return statement. Okay, so follow me here. I don't necessarily need a return statement if I am updating a list over in another function by passing it by reference. Why? Because it's already updated. We're referencing the same data structure, the same list. Keep that in mind. In our next exercise, we're going to delve into this even more. I will see you then.